started this series last week called I Am. Somebody say, I am. I am. And last week we started, man, y'all are responding good today. I'm ready, man. It's a room I want to preach to. And last week we talked about how Jesus is the bread of life. This is the first of 7 I Ams that he gives us. And we talked about eating from the bread of Jesus, right? It's not just, he's not just the bread that we come to and we just taste one time and we take a bite and then we go live the rest of our lives. No, he is our daily bread. He is the substance of our life. It says this in Psalm 34:8. People love to quote this verse. And it says this, it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. And a lot of people stop right there, right? Because you can come in, you can taste, you can be here in this moment today and you can taste and you'll see that the Lord is good. But the rest of that verse says this, blessed are those, or oh, the joys of those who take refuge in him. And so I like to read it like this, taste and keep on tasting, right? He's not just someone that we taste and then we go and go, yeah, the Lord's good. No. Blessed are those who take refuge in him. People that experience him day in, day out. And I just want to remind you today of what we said last week is just keep feasting on Jesus. No matter what you're going through, whatever difficulty you are, don't just take a bite today and forget about him until next Sunday. No. You just keep on feasting. Every day you have those moments with the Lord. And so today we're going to talk about where Jesus says, I am the light of the world. I am the light of the world. This is something that we talk a lot about this time of the year as we get into Advent and Christmas and all of that. And today we're going to be sharing from several passages. Got a lot of ground to cover. Genesis chapter 1. If you guys want to write these down or pull up your notes, is something you can dig into a little bit further. John chapter 1 and then John chapter 8 and John chapter 9. And let's start in the beginning. Genesis chapter 1. Come on, it's always a good place to go back to the beginning. Genesis 1, in the beginning, God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the earth was formless. Get this. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. So darkness was there. It was empty. It was vacant. Nothing. Darkness, you can think of darkness as nothingness. And it says it was formless. There was no form. There was no order. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now, a lot of times when we think of the creation narrative, we think of just God the Father, God the Creator. But that word right there, God, is the first description that God gives is the word Elohim. And Elohim is plural. It's not a singular word. It's not like God. It's a plural. It's God. Multiple. 3 in 1. And it says that the Spirit of God was hovering over the water. And God said, Elohim said, let there be light. So God said, and this was just kind of hard to describe, but let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And he separated light from the darkness. Now, I want you to understand something. The light here is not the sun. The light that is being revealed is God himself. It says in 1 John that God is light, and in him there is no darkness. So the first thing that God does, the first thing that Elohim does is reveal himself as light. There's darkness here. Here I am. No more darkness. Darkness is not permitted in my presence. So it's the first thing that God does. And he separates the light from the darkness. This is the first order of business with God when he shows up on the scene. He brings order, and the way that he brings order is by separating light from darkness. This is why you can't come and you encounter Jesus and live the same way that you did. Because he starts getting rid of the darkness in your life. And as you live a life in him, when you start drawing close to him, and he starts drawing close to you, you start realizing there are issues in your life that you didn't even know were there. But when the light comes on, you're going, oh, I don't like it when I do that. And you start living differently. Not because some preacher's telling you that, not because it says in the Levitical law that you need to stop doing that. No, because the light has come and it's exposing the darkness. And listen, darkness cannot dwell. That's why you can't say, well, I love Jesus, but I cuss a little. Some of y'all have that shirt. You need to go burn it. Not because I said so, but because you can't sit around here and be laid back about sinful things in your life. Well, I'm just struggling with it. Listen, let the light come. I'm already preaching. Get at this. Listen, it's not just in the beginning, it's also in the end. It says this in Revelation chapter 21, 23. You can write that down. It says this at the end. It says, this city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of the Lord illuminates the city, and the Lamb is the light. So one day when God wraps up this whole thing like a scroll, there will be light, and the light will be Him. We won't need a sun. We won't need a moon. We'll be right there in the fullness of His light. John chapter 1, because this is a series about Christology, about the study of Christ. In the beginning was the Word. The Word. Who is the Word? Jesus is the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. He was with the Father in the beginning. Through Him all things were made, and without Him nothing has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, get this, but the darkness has not understood it. Other translations say this, but the darkness could not overcome it. Darkness can't overcome light. Darkness has no power over light. Some of y'all are like, oh, the darkness is just so strong. Darkness has no authority over light. Light always gets rid of darkness. Darkness is the absence of light. Okay? There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John the Baptist. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all men might believe. He himself was not the light. Now, Jesus comes along later and says, John was the light. You enjoyed him for a little while. He says this, but he himself was not the light. He came only to witness to the light. The true light that gives light to every man was coming into the world. And when we talk about Advent, when we talk about Christmas time and all that, that simply means the arrival. The light is coming. The light has come. Actually, it has already come. He was in the world, Jesus, and through the world was made through him. The world did not recognize him. Though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. So if you remember, and we go through this, and we'll talk more about it today, is that as Jesus goes along, the world doesn't recognize that he is the Messiah. The world doesn't recognize that he is God in the flesh. And there's a lot of opposition because of this. And Jesus spends a lot of time saying, no, I am the one. And again, this is kind of the point of this series, is to discover Christ. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave them the right to become the children of God. Did you know that you're not a child of God already? You're not born out of the womb and you're a child of God. I know people like to say that. That's actually not the truth. That's actually a lie. A lie that Jesus challenges. You are a child of God by believing. To those that believe, he gives them the power. The word in the Greek is exousia, which is governmental authority to become children. It's like you got your adoption papers. Not just born of human birth, but you actually, it's documented. My brother has 4 adopted children. And did you know that because it is done in court, they have paperwork showing that these children belong to them. They're actually, in the eyes of the court, more legitimate children than my children that are birthed naturally. because there's a document that says that they are that. Ours, we have a birth certificate, but it's not like in court. The judge hasn't said they're his children. And so in heaven, come on, when we believe, he gives us exousia, governmental authority, God's governmental authority to become children of God. Verse 14, you okay? I'm just teaching today. The Word became flesh. The Word became flesh. The Word became human and made his dwelling among us. So Jesus always existed. Then he clothes himself with humanity. It's beautiful. This is why we celebrate Christmas, the incarnation. We have seen his glory. Now that word glory in the Greek language is the word where we get the word doxology. That's what it is. And it's another word for light. We have seen his light. We have seen his brilliance of the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. We like to talk about the grace of Jesus, but he didn't come to just bring grace. He also came to bring truth. So John chapter 8 is where we're going to be spending a lot of time today. John 8 and 9. A little bit of time. And there's this festival going on called Sukkot, or the Feast of Booths, or the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Shelters. Different translations say it different ways. And what would happen is this was a commanded feast that the children of Israel would have every year. It was at the kind of the beginning, around harvest time, just like this time of the year right now. And so what happened is they would all these people would have a pilgrimage to, all the Jewish people would have a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, and they would set up these tents outside. It's like they went camping, and they were really more like booths. And so they would set up these booths all around the temple, all around the city. And what they were doing is they were remembering that the children of Israel, when they were in the desert, remember, they lived in tents. They didn't have a permanent dwelling. So they were coming in and they were setting up these booths. They were going around and they would do this. And then one of the things that they would do is in the temple courts, in the most public place of the temple, is they would set up these huge candelabras right in the middle, and they would fill these bowls with oil and they would light them on fire. And it was all around the temple. And they would do this during this festival. And so what would happen is, at the end of this festival is when they lit those fire. And so what they're doing is they're remembering when the pillar of fire went around and led the children of Israel through the desert. So the fire that they would burn represents this brilliant light that was in the place of darkness. Are you tracking? And it's saying basically that the I am, it's revealing his presence, that he was with them in the desert, a place they had never been, a dark place, a desolate place. He's saying, my presence is here. I'm with you. Remember, Moses is like, we're not going. I'll go, but I'm only going to go if you go with me. He's like, I'll go with you, and I'll show you through a pillar of fire, through the dark nights of the desert. You'll know that I'm there. And then it represents God's provision, his protection, and his guidance through these dark places. How many know that when you are going through a dark season, the Lord will lead you. He will lead you with his light. Now understand that in the Bible, they didn't have light bulbs, right? You know this. Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, we have the shirt, right? The Christian shirt, it's got a light bulb on it. They didn't have, there's no context for that. Light was always illuminated by fire. That's why you can't be the light of the world that Jesus said you would be unless you got the fire of the Holy Ghost inside of you. You need a baptism of that fire. You don't need just a little taste. So this is the context that Jesus is in. Understand, track. So there's a woman in John chapter 8 caught in adultery. We know this story. We love this story. Everybody knows this story about Jesus, right? And so this woman is caught in the act of adultery. Now, I don't know where the guy is, but he should be in trouble also. Come on. I don't know where that guy is. He's probably right there accusing her. And so they're all up against Jesus, and they're like, what do we do with this woman? They drag her out to the most public place. Listen, this is where the fire was. They bring her to the most public place of the temple where everyone can see. They drag her out. She's either naked or they've covered her up a little bit. And she's there, and then they're like accusing her. And then they're picking up stones to stone her, and they're like, Jesus, what should we do with this woman? We want you to, basically they're saying, we want you to stone her. We want to see that you honor the law. And then Jesus says this, he that is without sin, cast the first stone. So he's like, okay. If you don't have any sin in your life, why don't you go ahead and cast? And everybody loves that part of the story. And it is an important part of the story. But Jesus did say something to the woman. Jesus said this, go and sin no more. So Jesus didn't go, oh, I love you, everybody's bad, but you're not bad. That's not what he said. Jesus actually agrees with the law that she should not be committing adultery. Jesus agrees with that. He just disagrees with the punishment. Because what Jesus is really revealing is that there's not an innocent person there. He's not just saying, I care for the accused. He's saying everyone that's making the accusations, they've also got sin in their life. And I'm revealing that right now. And this is the whole theme of John chapter 8, John chapter 9, is Jesus revealing things. So he reveals in this moment that they too are sinners. The standard was the same. The standard is the righteousness of God. Whoa, that's heavy. That's a high standard. And none of us meet it. So Jesus is like, put down your stones. And then he tells the woman, go and sin no more. So John chapter 8, verse 12, immediately after this, it says that Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. Then he says this, if you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. So he's not just calling, as he did with the bread of life. What's the word God requires? Believe in the way he said. He's actually calling them to obedience. So he says this, and the Pharisees get all worked up. There's a lot here in John chapter 8. I can't get into all of it. You should this week. It's awesome. And the Pharisees speak up. And they're like, who are you to say that you're this and all of this? And then Jesus says, your own law says, verse 17, your own law says that if two people agree about something, their witness is accepted as fact. So Jesus is bringing up the law. They know the law. And the law is this, is that you got to have two witnesses. It can't just be like, hey, that person said so they're guilty of something. You got to have witnesses. Or you can't confirm that Jesus is the I am just by him saying that. You got to have two witnesses. So they're kind of battling it out here. And then Jesus says this, I am the one witness, and my Father who sent me is the other one. Isn't that awesome? Since you don't know who I am, you don't know who my Father is. Listen, there's no bad cop, God the Father, and good cop, Jesus. And a lot of people are thinking this way. And Jesus is like, no. If you don't know me, you don't know my Father. The problem is you have a misunderstanding of who my Father is. Therefore, you don't recognize me. If you knew me, you would also know my Father. So there's this other group of people that believed in him, people that were buying into the miracles, that were following Jesus along. These people believe in him. And it says this in verse 31. Now, these are the Jewish people. Come on, they're not Gentile believers. They're just Jewish people that have started following Jesus. They're all here for the end of this feast. And Jesus said to the people who believed in him, you are truly my disciples if you remain to my teachings. Now, Jesus has already got his 12 disciples with him, but he's telling these other people, hey, listen, if you want to be like them, if you want to truly be my disciples, you got to remain faithful to my teaching. That's a firm word for some of you today. I know that you're calling yourself a Christian because you were raised a certain way, or because you go to church, or because you put it on your Facebook profile, Christian is my religion. No, he said, you're truly my disciples if you remain faithful. I think that's what we need in the church today. We need some faithfulness. Come on. And I'm not just talking about you show up on Sundays and you pay your tithes. I'm not just talking about that, although that's good. I'm talking about you living faithfully to Jesus. You have more than a bumper sticker on your car. You actually drive like you're faithful to Jesus. Whoops. Probably shouldn't have said that. All right. Then he says this, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. We love this. This is a very famous statement of Jesus. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free or make you free. And they start arguing. They're like, we're not slaves to anyone. We have Abraham as our father. And Jesus tells them, he's like, well, if you had Abraham as your father, you'd probably be living like Abraham lived. And then he says this in verse 42. He says, why can't you understand, verse 43, sorry. Why can't you understand what I'm saying? It's because you can't even hear me. And then he says this, for you are children of your father, the devil. Oh, Lord. I mean, that escalated pretty quick. I mean, you were kind of like, just believe in me, and it's all good. And now we're like telling you, hey, we're here, we're in this thing, and you're like, whoa. You don't recognize me. You're not faithful. You're sitting here trying to say I was raised a certain way. I'm living. I've been keeping all these laws and going to these festivals and all this stuff. And Jesus is like, you're rejecting me. You're not believing me for everything that I say. You're believing a little bit. You're the parts that you like. You're embracing that, but you don't like all of it. As soon as I start claiming to be God, you kind of start dismissing me. And he's like, Abraham isn't your father. Your father's the devil. I mean, wow. And he says this in verse 45. He says, since when I tell you the truth, it's just natural for you not to believe me because you have not been born again. And then he tells them, he says, Abraham looked forward to my coming. Abraham looked forward to my coming. And they're like, you don't even know Abraham. You're like not even 50 years old. I mean, they're like so dull. And Jesus says, and we referenced this last week, verse 58, he says, I'll tell you the truth. Before Abraham was even born, I am. And this is when they pick up stones to kill him because Jesus is saying, I'm God. And they're like, whoa, so we like Jesus that fits into the nice little box in the package of our culture. We don't really like it when you say you claim to be God. And listen, I can tell you that I've met many people that are claiming Christians and say they're not sure that Jesus is God. You got to get that right. You don't get to just have your little pocket Jesus, that kind of the belief system that you formed. Listen, if it's not the Jesus of the scriptures, it's not Jesus that can save you. It's a fake Jesus. The Jesus that comes and lives and makes his dwelling and dies on the cross is God in the flesh. If you can't get that right, you will die in your sin, and Jesus says this. So what's going on here? What is Jesus dealing with? Jesus is dealing with people in darkness, the spiritually blind, including the religious and people that believed in him. It's important for you to understand this. Because we love to pick on the religious, right? Well, look at the religious. They're the religious. Those are people in church. Well, that's not correct. Always. Sometimes it is. But he's also dealing with people that are very sincere in their belief. Sincerely wrong, but sincere nonetheless. So what's he dealing with? Jesus is really dealing with people that are in darkness. And the darkness speaks of a couple of things. First of all, and we talked about this in Genesis 1. Darkness speaks of absence, a void, no order. Number 2, darkness speaks of evil. This is why bars and strip clubs are open up late and all the wholesome places close early. Because evil lurks in the dark. When I was a kid, they had a commercial that would come on. A little statement. They would do all these like little slogans back in the day. We didn't have social media, so stuff stuck around for a little while. And they would have a thing that came on at 10 o'clock on television. You didn't get to go back and watch like old television. You had to watch live television. That's all we had was live television. No streaming. We didn't even have VCRs, if you know what that is. We didn't have TiVo, which some of y'all know what that is. No streaming at all. And they had this little program. Do you know where your kids are? And it's kind of like, hey, it's dark outside. It's getting late. Are your kids in? Why? Because we know that bad things happen in the night. And we all know this. Some people say, well, I'm a night owl. Careful with that. Because there's things that we will do in the darkness that we would never do in the light. It's just human nature. So darkness speaks of evil. Third, darkness speaks of deception or spiritual blindness.
This is primarily what Jesus is dealing with. He's dealing with spiritual blindness. And fourth is hopelessness. Fourth is hopelessness. Here's the reality. You just can't see without the light. You just can't see without the light. But if you have light, you can see. This is one thing that I've noticed. I've noticed that too many Christians, believers, have adapted to the darkness. And you might be able to see a little bit in the dark. But if you really want to see clearly, then the light must take center stage in your life. Some of you are walking in deception because you're not close enough to the light. You're not close enough to the light. So what does the light speak of?
Safety. The light speaks of safety. You guys ever see a vehicle when you're driving down the road and they have their lights on and they have a bumper sticker or a sticker on the side of that truck maybe that says lights on for safety. In light, there is safety. Think about when you were 6 years old going to bed and wondering about all those creepy crawlies hanging out in the closet or underneath the bed or behind the curtains. What made you feel safe? Man, I slept with the light on probably till I was about 14 years old. Because I have a pretty big imagination. I can come up with some things. Now I like it pitch light. I'm like, man, I need it as dark as it can get. And so I'm sending out text messages. I'm calling, did I do something? No, nothing. We're fine. We're good. And I'm like, we're obviously not good. Because I'm like, something happened, and I didn't, and they're like, you didn't do anything to offend me. It's just that the truth is offensive. The light is offensive to darkness. And here's the reality is when you close your eyes to the light of truth, you close your ears to God's voice. And you will grow accustomed to darkness. And the next thing you know, you're deceived. And careful. Because just because it looks good doesn't mean it is good. It says this in 2 Corinthians that the devil masquerades himself as an angel of light. So a lot of this like woke ideology that's going on right now in our world, it's like, oh, we're good. Love, 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 love. Like, what does that even mean? There was a thing that came out. It was like, what is a woman? I want to know. I want to ask people this. What is love? Because you don't have any bearing of what love is. It's just a word that you would say, well, that's not loving, or this is loving. Well, that's not loving because you spoke the truth. Well, that wouldn't be loving. But Satan will masquerade himself as an angel of light. Listen, darkness is always trying to imitate light. Always trying to appeal you, always saying, come in here to the darkness. And this is the greatest darkness that people live in. Are you ready? I'm a good person. I'm a good person. They're a good person. If you're a good person, why did Jesus come? And Jesus was dealing with the religious who think they've got it all figured out, and then he's dealing with sincere people who think they got it all figured out, and they're all going, we're a good person. We have Abraham as our father. Here lies the problem. Most people think that the worst thing that could happen to them is that they die. That's not the worst thing that could happen to you. The worst thing that can happen to you is that you die in your sin, that you die in your darkness. So Jesus makes this statement in verse 24. He says, for unless you believe that I am who I claim to be, you will die in your sin. And so the worst thing that could happen to you is not that you would die. The worst thing that could happen to you is that you would die in your sin. And so Jesus provides a way for you not to die in your sin, for you not to die guilty, because you're guilty and I'm guilty. If it's all upon me and I'm a good person, I get to go to heaven because I've been a good person. Guess what? I don't get to go in because I'm a guilty man. As much as I try, as sincere as I am a guilty man before the goodness of God. But I can tell you, it's not about who I am. It's about who he is. It's about the I am. And I believe that he came to rescue me. And I won't die in my sin because I believe in him, and whoever believes in him, he gives them the right to become children of God. The fourth thing that light speaks of is light speaks of hope. Advent, the Messiah, the arrival, the coming. I love that song that we sang this morning, when the night is holding on to me. I was just weeping as we were singing that, as I see some of my family struggling when the night is holding on to me. God is holding on. Even though it's dark and I'm going through the most difficult season of my life, God is holding on. There is hope. Psalm 34:5 says this, those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered in shame. They're never dismayed. They have hope. And the fifth thing it speaks of is guidance. Everybody say guidance. Psalm 119, 105. Your word is a lamp for my feet and a light to my path. Who is the word? Jesus. Jesus is the word fulfilled. Jesus is a lamp for your feet. He's a light for your path. And I want to remind you, Jesus isn't just talking about quote unquote believers. It says in James says this, he says even the demons believe. So you say, oh, I believe in God. Great, you got devil faith. Even the demons believe it. It says that they shake, they shudder in fear. Again, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. If you follow me. So we eat the bread and we follow the light. We eat the bread and we follow the light. If you follow me, you won't walk in darkness. How do you know someone's following Jesus? They live in the light. So in John 9, there's a blind man. I love how it's all packaged so well together. Just listen, if you all have read the Bible, just read it again. As I'm reading through this week, I'm just going, I was talking to Jeff last Sunday. He's like, man, what's going on? I was like, man, I'm just reading the scriptures over and over and over again. And I'm just like seeing things that I've never noticed before. Every time I read the scripture, there's something there that I've read. Literally, I've read the book of John and easily 100 times. You know that when I read it now, I still get something out of it. Like I study it. I'm not just like, well, devotional time, check. I'm like in it, and I'm still seeing things that I've never seen before. This week, I saw things that I've never seen before. So you see this story, this guy in John chapter 9. It's a blind man. Jesus is going along the way, and there's a blind man there. He's been blind since birth. And so the disciples are like, hey, so who sinned? Right? Have you ever had that happen? You have something wrong. They're like, well, who sinned? It's like, and Jesus is like, nobody sinned. He's like, he He was born blind. He said that neither sin, that he's this way so the work of God might be manifest or displayed. Can I tell you today? Because we always want to blame somebody, right? Why is this situation happening this way? Why am I dull? Why am I blind? Why am I going through a difficult time? Why am I in a season of darkness? All this why? Jesus is like, the why is that a miracle could happen. Can I tell you today, stop wondering why this is happening to me and just going, Lord, I'm a good candidate for a miracle today. This is called putting your faith in Jesus. So Jesus makes a statement in John 9. He repeats what he said in John 8. Where I got that. While I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. Oh, it was only, yes, because it was John the Baptist. Jesus spoke with that light. Jesus is like, I am the light. And then he tells the disciples, you are the light of the world. Matthew 5. So he's like, then he spit in the ground and made mud of the saliva and spread it in the mud over the man's eyes. That's not okay. I mean, listen, spit is spit. Even if it's Jesus' spit, it's still spit. It's gross. And so Jesus makes mud out of his spit, which takes a lot of spit to make mud. I mean, he's like drooling over there trying to get some mud, and he wipes it on this guy's eyes. Like, maybe he doesn't see it. Maybe that's why he's not grossed out. I mean, if I'm there, I'm like, Lord. And he told him, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So Jesus touched his eyes, but he wasn't healed yet. And he said, then the man went and washed and came back seeing. I wouldn't be so mad about the spit. I would have been offended at first, but as soon as he came back seeing, it was all good. I knew it. I knew it, Lord. I knew you were going to deliver him, Lord. This man's eyes weren't healed until he obeyed the command of Jesus. And listen, you can come, you can have a moment. You can come up here, you can get prayed for. God can do an incredible work in your life, but until you go out and you obey, you can still walk in darkness. You can still walk in spiritual blindness, but the Lord is calling you out of that darkness and he's calling you into the light. He came back seeing. Listen, there are some of you that you're going to continue to walk in darkness until you start obeying the Lord. Some of you are still going to be in gloom, in depression, until you obey the Lord. Until you start fellowshipping with the Lord. So living in the light, what does it mean? We're hurrying. Number one, walk in the light. Living in the light means to walk in the light. I love it that this is a sort of baptism to go wash yourself. Some of you, we need to make baptism a little bit more of a priority when people come to Jesus. We've talked about this a lot because it's like this is the first act of obedience to Jesus, is to be baptized. Listen. If you have come to faith in Jesus and you have not been baptized, you are living, say this kindly, you are living in disobedience because Jesus called you to do it. I'm not trying to bend your arm or anything. We'll do baptisms next week. Get signed up because you want to obey Jesus. Some of you have addictions in your life that are going to fall off just because you get baptized. So we'll do that next week. So listen, walk in the light. Go where he tells you to go. Do what he tells you to do. Follow his ways. Stay in the light by walking in the light. 1 John 1:5. This is the message we've heard from him, and that we declare to you, God is light. We referenced this earlier. In him there is no darkness at all. If we do not live by the truth, do you see the caveat here? If we do not live by the truth, we claim to have fellowship with him and walk in the darkness, we lie and we do not live by the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. Come on, don't you love that? We have fellowship with one another. Why? Because we're in the light. And the blood of Jesus purifies us from all sin. So we're not just forgiven, we're not right. Actually, sin tendencies start falling off our life because we're living in the light. That's why, listen, we ain't about that carnal life. Listen, if you're coming into this house and you're looking for people to be immoral with, or you're looking for somebody to come clubbing, you're in the wrong house. We walk in the light. We follow Jesus together. We don't give into your carnal, sinful desires together. We ain't having booze parties over at your house. We walk in the light. We follow Jesus together. We honor Jesus together. I mean, I'm preaching right now, and some of y'all quiet, a little too quiet, got me concerned about you. Listen, we're not going to celebrate your carnality. We're not going to celebrate the works of the flesh. We're not going to celebrate your sexual immoral lifestyle. We're not going to celebrate that. We'll celebrate you, we'll honor you, we'll love you, but we're going to pull you into the light because we follow Jesus together. Doesn't mean that we're perfect, because we're not. But we mean this, we're not playing games with God. We're not seeing how much darkness I can keep a hold of. Number 2, stay in the light. So when you slip up, because you're going to, you're going to slip up. Or you might find yourself in a dark season, just an emotional low, or you're going through it, the valley of the shadow of death. You're dealing with it. You're low. You're going through darkness and gloom and despair. I remember going through the deepest, darkest season of my life. And I remember this woman came up to me that knew what I was going through. And she quoted this verse to me, Micah 7:8. She said, just want to remind you of the verse. I was kind of crushing on her, if I'm being honest. So when she said this, I was like, oh, okay, we're out of that mode into this new mode. I was single. So, I wasn't walking in darkness. I wasn't in darkness. There were no Leslie Brown. We good? All right. She begins to prophesy to me this verse. She says, as it says in Micah 7:8, do not gloat over me, my enemy. Though I have fallen, I will arise. Though I sit in darkness, the Lord will be my light. Listen, whatever darkness you're dealing with, maybe you're dealing with the struggle against sin. Maybe you're just going through discouragement. Maybe you just feel hopeless. Right now, I'm telling you, just tell the devil, don't gloat over me. I might not be doing so good today, but I can tell you what, the Lord is my light. Do not gloat over me, my accusers. I'm telling you, I know it looks bad. I know it's difficult, but the Lord will be my light. Start just declaring the power of the Holy Spirit and the freedom that is in Jesus into your situation. Number 3, shine the light. Don't just receive the light, shine the light. Moses, when he went up to the mountain and received the law, there was a light that came on him. The problem was that light started to fade. And so they covered Moses up because they didn't want people to be all like, oh, Moses, 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 which they were doing. The glory didn't fade too much. So they covered up his face. They put a veil over his face, and no one saw that it was dimming because the glory was decreasing. But it says this in 2 Corinthians chapter 3:18, we with unveiled faces, we don't need a veil. We all reflect. We are all being transformed into his likeness. I don't look like Jesus that much today, but tomorrow I'm going to look a little bit more like him. There's an ever-increasing glory. And what I've seen my whole life following Jesus, I've seen people come and encounter the light, and then they go away, and it starts to dim. And they start to hide in shame. And the fire dwindles. I tell you what, when I came to Jesus 30 years ago in my bedroom, I said, Lord, I don't want to play games. I don't want to be like those kids that go to camp and they're all on fire for God this week, and next week they're not, and they're up and down and wishy-washy, and it depends on how much they like the song service. And I said, Lord, I want to grow. I want to know you for who you are. And I don't think the glory's faded. because it's an ever-increasing glory. Because I'm not. It's not because everything's gone so easy. No, it's not that I've got it all figured out. It's because I have been attracted to the light. It's because I get before the light, and because of that, I am continually being transformed into his likeness. I look more like him than I did 10 years ago. I look way more like him than I did 30 years ago. And tomorrow and next week and a decade from now, I'm going to look more like him than I do right now, because I have an unveiled face and I am getting before him, and the glory is increasing. I want to tell you, beloved, don't settle into your darkness. Come to the light. Listen, our posture should never be, Lord, what can I get away with? How much darkness can I have, Lord? It should always be, Lord, I just want your light to permeate every part of my countenance, that I would be a reflector of the goodness and the glory of God, that I would fulfill that prophecy of Jesus where he said, you are the light of the world. I'm just a reflection. Don't fade. Just keep looking at the light. Will you stand? Listen, I really felt it necessary to call you into the light today. I'm going to ask the ministry team to come up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to package this in a way to whatever the darkness means. It doesn't really matter what the darkness means. Darkness can mean depression. It can mean despair. It can mean discouragement, or it can just be a sinful lifestyle. Any of those. The solution for them all are the same. The solution for those things is the same. The solution is coming into the light.
Thank you for joining us at Overflow Church today. We hope that you were encouraged and encountered the reality of Jesus. If you did, please let us know in the comments. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss anything that we have coming up. Have a great day.